All set? Okay, thank you. Well, good evening and welcome to Saginaw Valley State University. For all of you, those of you that joined us in person, there are another 46 or 7 guests that are zoomed in for this presentation, so it's a pleasure to have you all here. It is my honor to gather this evening for the annual Dr. Rana Akbar Memorial Lecture Series. It was established here at SVSU by Dr. Akbar in 2011. Since that time, many topics have been covered, primarily on Islamic faith, culture, and history. I have no doubt tonight's lecture will be a compelling and fitting tribute to the legacy of Dr. Rana Akbar. Some of you might already know that Rana was an outstanding member of this university's Board of Control and an ardent supporter of SVSU for many, many years. In addition to her distinguished medical career in Saginaw, Rana was a devoted wife and mother, physician, community leader, and dedicated advocate for inclusivity, especially in respect to interfaith relationships. She worked tirelessly to promote understanding of the Muslim faith and created an Islamic center in Saginaw. We are truly grateful for Rana's legacy, and we say thank you through this annual lecture established by Dr. Wahid Akbar in memory of his wife. Dr. Akbar and his family have been outstanding proponents of intercultural understanding. I would like to thank Dr. Akbar for his continued dedication to inclusivity in the Great Lakes Bay region. I'd also like to thank the Herbert H. and Grace A. Dow Foundation for making this event possible through their support of the Dow Visiting Artists and Scholars Series. Dr. Akbar, we are proud to honor Rana this evening. I would now invite you to the podium to say a few words.
Thank you, Don. Thank you. Thank you very much. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I begin with the name of God, the most merciful, the most beneficent. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you. Thank you, Dr. Bashan, for this wonderful introduction to this evening's event, and to Rana and my family. After Rana passed away, which I can't believe is now 13 years ago, met with our dear friend, Dr. Era Gilbertson, who was the president of SVSU at that time. We thought a lecture series like this would be the best tribute. And since that time, we have continued this as regularly as possible. This is the 11th year. And Dr. Donald Bashan, since he has been president, has been extremely, extremely supportive of this lecture series. He has attended all of them. He remains engaged, and I'm really grateful for Dr. Bashan's support and his friendship. Thank you, Don. Thank you very much. This event wouldn't be possible without the support and the system which has been set up by Saginaw Valley State University for lectures of this kind. Just not too long ago, we were talking about the different lectures we have. And sometimes there are so many that most of us who want to attend are unable to attend all of them. So I would like to also thank Saginaw Valley to keep this legacy going of bringing esteemed speakers from all over the country, I would say at times all over from the world, to this kind of lectures, which are ongoing. And I would recommend all of you to keep the website in your mind for the university's lecture series and try to attend and support as many as you can. Part of the reason we discuss this is that Rana and I, whenever we would talk, and we all get upset or worried of the misrepresentation of Islam and about the beliefs we have. And we always thought that we can complain, but the best way for us is to do events like this, to bring to people's, to bring it to the forefront what the religion is all about. It is our responsibility as Muslims to create events like this, both on interfaith and on Muslim topics. So today's speaker, Dr. Abdul Kabir, is as much of a dream come true as possible. Rana, if she was around, would be sitting in the front, cheering her up. There's a young lady who is a professor. She is a woman of color who is a PhD. She's an intellectual, she's an activist, and I have always looked for speakers like this. So I would also like to thank Dr. Abdul Kabir for accepting us as a venue to discuss the topic is obviously in front of you. I would also like to thank Dr. David Nichols from Saginaw Valley State University, who has been instrumental in helping organize these. I have had the dream, and hopefully it continues, that this should be, hopefully, as long as at least I live or beyond, an ongoing series. And the support, again, people like Dr. Bashan and Dr. Nichols has given us will hopefully continue this into the long-term future. I would also like to thank my niece, Jennifer Liu, who, when I was starting, she was right there with me. And thank you, Jen. This wouldn't be here without your support and help. So again, thank you everyone for attending. And I would like to request Dr. David Nichols to come and introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Akbar, and thank you everyone for coming tonight. Tonight's speaker is indeed yet another excellent addition to the Dr. Rana Akbar Memorial Series on Islam and Culture. Dr. Suad Abdul Kabir is Associate Professor of American Culture and Arab and Muslim American Studies at the University of Michigan. She received her PhD in Cultural Anthropology from Princeton University. She also holds degrees from Georgetown University and Abu Noor University in Damascus. Dr. Abdul Kabir is an anthropologist, a performer, and an activist. Her 2016 book, Muslim Cool: Race, Religion, and Hip Hop in the United States by New York University Press is an ethnography on Islam and hip hop. It offers us an insightful glimpse into what it means to be Muslim and Black, and how that convergence further shapes our ways of thinking about race. She knows how to take hip hop to young people too. She does a solo show called Sampled Beats of Muslim Life, in which she puts scholarship to poetry, theater, and movement. Dr. Abdul Kabir has a website about the Black Muslim experience in America called Sapelo Square. Our mission, says the website, is to celebrate and analyze the experiences of Black Muslims in the United States to create new understandings of who they are and what they have done and why that matters, end quote. It's about replacing the marginalization, erasure, and misunderstanding with something more positive. She has also written for various publications, some of which I'm sure you have heard of: The Roots, The Washington Post, The Atlantic, Ebony Magazine, Huffington Post, and so on and so forth. Additionally, she was a senior project advisor for an award-winning documentary, New Muslim Cool. You can read her poetry in the anthology Living Islam Out Loud, American Muslim Women Speak. In 2018, CNN named her as one of 25 influential American Muslims. And in 2019, she received the Soros Equality Fellowship. I think you get the idea. Check out her website. It's quite sharp, suadabdulkabir.com. At the close of her talk tonight, we will have a question and answer period. There are index cards that will be going around. You are encouraged to write a question or two. We will collect those, and we'll get through as many as we can. We'll make some selections probably. I doubt we'll be able to get through all of them, but thank you for helping us with that process. And at the very end tonight, we will have a book signing outside. We hope you'll join us for that. You can purchase her new book, Muslim Cool, and you can get her to sign it for you as well. And we hope you'll say hello to her and meet her in person. Now, let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Suad Abdul Kabir.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Okay, very good. So I'll thank you to the president of Saginaw Valley State University, to Dr. Akbar, Dr. Nichols, all the staff and faculty here who made this night possible. So thank you for the invitation. You know, I had mentioned this at the dinner we had. I'm sorry, I feel an echo. Do you hear an echo? Right? Okay. Are we good on the sound though? This is not on anymore, right? Okay, all right, I'll keep going. All right, anyway. So, you know, as I mentioned, they were kind enough to host me for dinner before the lecture tonight. And as I mentioned, you know, I had the pleasure of meeting and spending some time with Dr. Rana Akbar, and she was a formidable human being. And so I'm really humbled and honored to give a talk this evening in the memory of all that she stood for. Tonight, I begin in the name of Allah, for the love of Muhammad, to honor the ancestors and the celebration of my people. I also begin by acknowledging, as a descendant of stolen people on stolen land, that the land upon which we gather is the ancestral and unceded territory of the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, and some of us are uninvited guests. But we can work so that these land acknowledgements turn into tangible action so we no longer have to be. I also acknowledge, by way of the histories of colonialism, imperialism, white supremacy, and resistance that brought us here to this very moment, that every day is Ashura and every land is Karbala. So tonight, I'm going to talk to you about Muslim Cool, a way of being Muslim in the United States that tells a really important story about race, religion, and power. And so in order to do so, I want to begin by clarifying some terms. And so the first term I want to talk about, there we go, is hip hop. So you might be like me, you might not, but if you're like me, you're a member of what people call the hip hop generation. So you grew up as hip hop grew up. And you remember a time when people were like, hippity what? You know, what is this hip hop stuff, right? But those days are long gone, right? The days where hip hop is unknown are long gone. However, mainstream understandings of hip hop music and culture haven't necessarily grown as well. Many people still think of hip hop as rap, and I'm putting that in quotation marks, whereas basically a bunch of songs where young black men tell stories about crime and violence and women. And while those stories do in fact exist in hip hop and they show up in hip hop, that's not all that hip hop is. Hip hop is an artistic form expressed in DJing, emceeing or rapping, dance, and graffiti. Hip hop is also a lens through which people understand the world. It shapes ideas and language. Hip hop is also a site of cultural production, places where we make fashion and determine style. And above all else, hip hop is a site of critical contradiction and contestation, meaning that it is a commodity and an oppositional culture at the same time, right? Oh, hold on, sorry. So this is my slide. My slides are backwards. Okay, so hip hop is Cardi B and Kendrick Lamar, and despite everything, it is still Kanye, right? Hip hop is simultaneously rooted in the lived experience of the diaspora of African descendant people and appropriated in ways that are unrecognizable to those very people. And as a commodity, hip hop also exemplifies how the proliferation of Black expressive culture, the types of things that Black people produce in the world, can devalue Black life as much as it celebrates it. So let me go back to my other slide. So hip hop was born in the ravages of the 1970s South Bronx of New York City. And at a time that hip hop produced anthems like this, The Message by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. So we'll just hear a little clip from it.
Broken glass everywhere. People on the stage, you know they just don't care. I can't take the smell, can't take the noise. Got no money to move out, I guess I got no choice. Rats in the front room, roaches in the back, junkies in the alley with the baseball bat. I tried to get away, but I couldn't get far, cause a man with a touch repossessed my car. Don't push me, cause I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under.
So I wanted to play that for you because this is a classic hip hop track. It's one of these legendary hip hop tracks, and it really does a great job of illustrating the conditions, right, the hip hop was emerging in, right? The result of urban policies that resulted in severe unemployment, the loss of quality housing and jobs, public services, the flight of private investment and also white flight out of cities into the suburbs. New York City in the 1970s was sort of emblematic of this, but it was happening all over the country. And as the age of crack began, hip hop amplified the voices of people who were living in those conditions. Young, urban, Black, brown, poor, immigrant, people that the state had dismissed as worthless and pathological. And so through hip hop, young Black and non-Black Latine people responded to official abandonment with creativity that reflected both harshness and joy. Importantly, hip hop doesn't come out of nowhere, right? It also has a history. It is a descendant of blues and jazz from the US South, or blues from the South, jazz from the urban North, as well as dance and martial art traditions like Brazilian capoeira, as well as the Jamaican tradition of toasting and the sound system. And this is because hip hop's styles, sounds, and symbols are rooted in the creative energy of that diaspora I talked about, of the African diaspora. The involuntary African diaspora of the Middle Passage and the 20th century migrations of Black people from the US South, as well as the English and Spanish-speaking Caribbean and Latin America to the United States. So the next term that I want to go to is Muslim or Islam. So when I was doing research for this book, I had the opportunity to interview this gentleman, Jorge Popmaster Fable Pabon. He is a legendary hip hop figure, senior vice president of the Rocksteady Crew, which is the first hip hop b-boy collective. He's a longtime member of the Universal Zulu Nation, which is sort of the first hip hop organization. And he also is currently the curator of fashion artists in residence at the Universal Hip Hop Museum, which is currently under construction in the Bronx. And so when I talked to Popmaster Fable, he shared some of his earliest recollections of Islam and hip hop, years before his own conversion. So I'm going to quote him. DJ Africa Islam, they call him the son of Bambaataa. He would DJ on the radio on WHBI, and he would play breakbeats, play excerpts from El Hajj Malik Shabazz's speeches, Elijah Muhammad, Farrakhan. He would take little sound bites. You would hear a breakbeat, and over it, Assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum assalam. And the Supreme Team, Just Allah, the Superstar, and Say Divine and Mastermind, and they were on a radio, part of a show in '82, maybe with Mr. Magic. They would make references to the 5%, and always end their show with words of wisdom for life, which is cool and would have some Islamic ideas. So in this description, right, of him listening to the radio and what's happening over the radio and the different ways in which Islam and Muslim ideas are kind of coming through the radio airwaves, he identifies the first bend of what I call the loop of Muslim cool, right? And I take this idea of a loop from hip-hop sampling techniques. So if you're familiar with hip-hop, you know that hip-hop music is made through sampling, right? So there's a piece of music that was already in existence, and a sample is taken from it and is looped over and over again to create new music. So I use kind of this idea of the loop, right, as a metaphor to describe the linkages between Black Islam, hip-hop, Black Islam and hip-hop. So what Fable is describing, right, is this, the first bend of the loop, where Black Islam, right, is influencing hip-hop, right? And then the other end of the loop, which we'll talk about as well today, hip-hop then influences young Muslims and then returns them to Black Islam. So we're gonna go through that loop today. So Pop Master Fable's description of DJ Africa Islam's radio playlist, which included these sound bites, right? From speeches by Nation of Islam leaders Elijah Muhammad and Minister Louis Farrakhan, and the radio show that would open up with the greeting, the Muslim greeting, Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum assalam, right, is an example of this first bend. Indeed, by the time that hip hop comes into existence, Islam, as a religious practice, had reclaimed its space as a part of Black spiritual and political life in the United States. And I say reclaim because we know that there were numbers of Muslims among those Africans enslaved in the US. Estimates are anywhere from sort of 10% to 30%. We know of the documented histories. We know of them because of these documented histories of people like Omar ibn Said, who was enslaved in sort of DC, Maryland, Virginia area, and Abdullah Ibrahim ibn Sori, who was enslaved in Natchez, Mississippi, and ultimately won his freedom, right? And in his narrative, so we know we have these what they call slave narratives, or we have these stories of enslaved African Muslims. So we know about their existence through the way they wrote their own stories, right? But of course, we also know that the realities of slavery meant that you couldn't practice and pass on Islam in a communal way, right? You couldn't sort of teach your kids and they could teach their kids because the nature of slavery was that you didn't have freedom. So you didn't have freedom to practice religion as you wanted. And so Islam as an everyday practice gets somewhat lost in Black communities, but it reemerges again in the 20th century. In the early part of the 20th century, by way of interactions between two groups of migrants. Black American migrants coming from the Deep South during the Great Migration. And there were also some Black migrants from the English-speaking Caribbean at this time as well, and Muslim migrants from parts of South Asia, parts of the Middle East. And they're meeting in these North American cities, like Saginaw, or like Detroit, or Chicago, or Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh, and Brooklyn, right? They're meeting in these places. And this is how Black Islam comes back together, comes to be. And I use the term Black Islam as a kind of broad tent term to capture a lot of different movements that you'll see sort of identified here, right? So I'm talking about the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. I'm talking about the Moorish Science Temple. I'm talking about the Nation of Islam. I'm talking about the Nation of Gods and Earths. And I'm also talking about Sunni and Shia, sort of Orthodox Black Muslims. Now, each of these articulations, right, have a different relationship to the intellectual and spiritual traditions developed throughout Muslim history, and some debate whether some of these folks are even Muslim. But for me, what is important here is not those debates, but what links these groups or these articulations of Islam to each other and to Black American history and contemporary life. And what links them is a pointed concern with the realities of Black communities living in conditions of systemic inequality. These traditions, all of them, respond to conditions of injustice by articulating through Islam alternative ways of doing politics, alternative ways of living geared toward individual and community empowerment. Today I have the opportunity to meet, right, with some of the people who are part of that history here in Saginaw. So if you guys are from here, I'm not, right? So there's the Islamic Center of Saginaw, right? And I had the opportunity to meet with, and I don't know their last names, so I'm just gonna call them by their first names, Brother Salim and Brother Robert, and also Dr. Akbar, to learn about the history here. And in their stories, right, you hear this same thing. You hear the same, I was living a certain kind of way. It wasn't a positive way. When I heard about A Message to the Black Man by Elijah Muhammad, when I heard about this, when I got this knowledge, it changed me the way I wanted to live. And then I became committed, right, to not only uplifting myself and my family, but my whole entire community. And these men are living here today, now retired from GM and doing all, and still very, very much active in their communities. Or the first Muslim, they said, that was in Saginaw, Sister Adesta Rasul, right? People who, these are not famous. I mean, names probably like Malcolm X, right? You may have heard of Elijah Muhammad. But when we talk about Black Islam, we're not just talking about the kind of big names. We're talking about everyday Black people, right, who felt inspired by a message, again, to uplift themselves, but also their entire communities, right? And so when hip hop is coming into existence, this is in the air, right? This idea that if you're gonna be righteous, if you're gonna be conscious, if you're gonna be about something, if you're gonna be about justice, you're probably a Muslim, one of these kinds, right? Or you have some relationship to that. So when hip hop comes into existence in Black communities, this is something that everybody knows, right? And so then there's this impact, right? There's an impact of hip hop because of that, there's this profound impact that these movements, all of them, that Black Islam has on hip hop music and culture. And that impact can be sort of summed up in hip hop's fifth element, knowledge of self. So earlier I mentioned, right, that hip hop music has artistic elements, so DJing, emceeing, dance, graffiti. But in the hip hop community, we also talk about the fifth element, knowledge, which comes from knowledge of self. Knowledge of self is a concept that comes directly from the Nation of Islam. It comes directly from the book, Message to the Black Man, which was written by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, where he talks about this idea of knowledge of self. As a side note, this is a side note for the Islamic studies people in the audience. I also encountered knowledge of self in a book by Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, the 12th century Islamic scholar, who has a book called The Alchemy of Happiness, and the first chapter of that book is called Knowledge of Self, right? So knowledge of self is about learning about your past that has been hidden from you, being attuned and aware of what's going on to you right now, so therefore you can make a way forward in the future. Knowledge of self is an ethical stance towards other human beings, towards the natural world, and towards the divine, right? And so in hip hop music and culture, you're gonna find knowledge of self replete. So what I wanna do is pause and show you a little mashup video I did, right? I'll just play the video and we'll talk about it.
Malcolm X. No sellout. Malcolm X. No sellout. You can't deny that. You may not like my opinion, but you can't deny it. If you're afraid to tell the truth, why you don't even deserve freedom.
Knowledge yourself is what you need to stop the war. If you don't get it, I'm held responsible. Rhymes I make are designed to reach the youth. I gotta teach, that's why I speak the truth. Some waste time dwelling on the past. It's time to know that we're the lost drops of past. All people will survive America. All people will survive America.
I'm the intelligent, wise on the mic. I will rise right in front of your eyes, cause I am a surprise. So I'ma let my knowledge be born to a perfection. All praise is due to Allah, and that's a blessing.
Calls to the tip, singing how you change when you a Muslim now. No more dope games. I just got the phone call, heard you got bail. Wanna go to the mosque, no time for females. I'm losing touch with my homie, he's a changed man. He hit the pin and now no sinning is the game plan. When I say I'm living large, all you see is the struggle. When I say I'm still thugging, all you see is the trouble.
illallah, I'll wear it till I die. Here to leave a legacy, an imprint on this earth, and if I'm not doing that, then I should have died at birth.
We are all just as who Halab and Al-Azm. We are all Hamza, we are all Hammer. We are all Syrian, hands to the summer, say and the people united will never be defeated.
Double point the judge, it might be not see. Insecurity, identity, doubt. You think that they see a neighbor, they see a villain is out. They shooting, major die. The act as if the murder innocence is not crime. Killers on the wrong watch when your time's up. I hope you hear this right when you hide that. Trayvon, who are you? Trayvon, Trayvon, who are you? Trayvon, where?
So, every time I created this video a long time ago and I try to update it and things like that, but every time I watch this stuff, I'm like, just play the music. Let the music speak for itself, because everything is so powerful and clear from when the music comes through. And so, a couple things about what we saw here, right? So the first thing, remember what Fable said about these samples, right, of Malcolm X, right? So we hear this song from '83, Malcolm X No Sellout, right? Whereas basically, segments of Malcolm X speeches over breakbeats, right? Then we see Lakim Shabazz, right? Talking about knowledge of self, right? Talking about being the lost tribe of Shabazz, but I don't know if you all caught it also in the video. He does a really great thing where you see there's a scene where there are these men doing what we would call, sort of broadly speaking, a sort of Sufi spiritual trance dance, right? And then he pairs that with people sort of b-boying, right? And making these connections, right? And then of course, we have Pac, right? Rest in peace, who was talking about his experience with his homie, right? Who we used to run in the streets together, but now he's a Muslim, right? So he's like, I'm not selling drugs no more. I ain't got time for no women. I'm on the straight and narrow for myself and for my community. And then, I wanted to so that message, right, this message of being sort of knowledge and having knowledge of self and the impact of that we see. But there are also other parts of what knowledge of self looks like and reflects in the mashup, right? So we see two different Muslim women talking about what it means to be women and to be artists and to be mothers, right? And how to do that. We have an Arab American Muslim artist, Omar Effendum, right? Talking about, and this is in 2012, right, during the height of the Arab Spring, as they call it, right? Talking about, the people want to end the regime, right? And of course, we have Mos Def talking about Trayvon, and then the last clip, there's nobody talking about anything, right? But you have these two black Muslim women dancers. They're actually twins. They're called El Tawam, and they're dancers, right? And they're expressing this relationship between Islam and hip hop through dance. So I want to now move on to the other bend, right? So Black Islam, right? Black people who become Muslim, who are about knowledge of self, shape hip hop. Now hip hop is going to impact young Muslims to lead them back to Black Islam. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's see what's happening here. Okay, I'm not sure why you see the thing there, but we're good. So how does hip hop give knowledge of self to Muslims and returned them to Black Islam. So I'm going to share with you 3 stories of people that I spent time with. So I did my work for Muslim Cool in Chicago primarily, and I met people through this organization called the Inner City Muslim Action Network. It's based on the southwest side of Chicago. It's an organization that is dedicated to, it's also on the southwest side of Chicago, so most of the people that it serves are Black US Americans, Mexican US Americans, and some Palestinians. And the people that I worked with, who I call my teachers, were young Muslims, college age, a little bit older mostly. They were Black, they had roots in the Middle East, and they had roots in South Asia. So one of them, and these are all pseudonyms, it's not their real names, okay? So one of them was Omar Mukhtar. So for a young Arab American man like Omar Mukhtar, the loop of Muslim Cool meant understanding his identity as an Arab American and a Muslim through MC's, quote, using Muslim language, unquote. He would listen over lo-fi hip-hop radio shows way into the night and devour hip-hop manifestos like Bomb the Suburbs. He told me, quote, through hip-hop, I did validate my own Islam. It no longer felt like I was, apart from something greater. Because through hip-hop, it was like you always heard Nas, the Fugees, mentioning Islamic references in their rhymes. And it was like, okay, word. So I'm not just this minority group offshoot, it's like I'm recognized. Hip-hop also helped him understand Islam as a religion. He said, quote, hip-hop simplified Islam for me. Islam is a simple religion if you really think about it. The prophetic tradition is very simple as well. If you look at him, the prophet, his attributes were not how long his beard was or how short his thobe was. That's all irrelevant. What's really relevant is that he was a compassionate, truthful, honest human being. And that's the same thing with hip-hop. What they are really looking for is for people to be understanding, compassionate, truthful, and just merciful. It's like the RZA said, and it's a 5% thing I like to carry around. You need knowledge, wisdom, understanding, justice, freedom, equality, love, peace, and happiness. Turning this loop of Muslim Cool for Omar Mukhtar also meant moving away from the aspirations to be like white people. So he described his local Arab American community like this. They had this honorary white sort of understanding. They were like, oh, we're exempt because we're here and they like us. So people try to lay low. And I'm like, if they're coming for us, they're coming for all of us. I was reading a lot of Black Panther literature, Eldridge Cleaver, Mumia, through which I began to see that you just swap the word Black with Muslim and it all becomes very relevant. You start to attach the struggles together, the civil rights struggle, and at the time I was really into the Palestinian thing. You start to identify the two and understand the two together. Now for Latifah, who isn't Arab American, she is Black US American, turning the loop of cool looked a little bit different. It meant reaffirming the link between being Black and being Muslim. So Latifah hung out with a lot of Arab American Muslims, particularly Palestinians. And Latifah was playing with her headscarf styles. For some people, the hijab, and I hate that word, I never use it, so that's the last time you hear it from me tonight, it looks a certain kind of way, right? Typically, a woman wears a scarf, her face is kind of wrapped around her face, right? Maybe it's long, maybe it's short, but this is how it goes. But there are plenty of ways that Muslim women cover. So Latifah was playing with a different style, where you kind of have, almost like how I'm having it, but a bun in the back. And she was playing with that style, she said, because really, it made her feel more Black and more in touch with her Black self, right? Why would that happen? Well, that's because that kind of headscarf is deeply grounded in the Black Muslim experience, right? It's an Afro-diasporic headstyle, so not only Muslim women wear their scarves that way, right? But it's something that Black Muslim have authorized as a way you can be modest as a Muslim woman. So for her, being in a space where there weren't a lot of Black Muslims around her, seeing that scarf style and trying to, and potentially wearing it, like sort of created a space for her to feel more connected to who she was, because otherwise she was feeling disconnected. Now, it wasn't just scarf styles for Latifah, right? She worked at Iman. She drew heavily, okay, so it was not just her scarf style. She was a spoken word artist and singer, so she drew heavily on lots of Black popular culture styles, right? From the way she held a note, dropped a verse, to the way she moved her body, right? And she also was an activist at Iman. So so when she says, I feel Blacker, it's not because she's not caught up in like what's authentically Black. No, rather, right, she felt disconnected from that sincere Blackness that invisibly linked her to other Black people, right? And because then we're going to move on to Esperanza with this too. So why does this matter? I meant to share something. So Latifah wanted to wear the headscarf style, right? Because she said it made her feel more connected to her Blackness. But her Palestinian friend said to her, you can't wear your scarf like that. If you do, you're going to go to hell, right? Like this is the options here, right? So she's like, what do I do, right? This type of thing, right? So part of it is like, and that comes from her Palestinian friends having their own sort of culturally informed sense of what's appropriate for Muslims, right? They're framing it as religious, right? But it's a really culturally informed sense of that. So when Latifah turns Luba Muslim cool, right? When she sort of reaches back into hip hop, when she sort of, in her work as an artist and an activist, what she ends up doing is kind of reaffirming that I too, as a Black person, have a culturally informed understanding of what Islam is. And it is just as valid, just as relevant, just as meaningful as other Muslims. Finally, we come to Esperanza. So, like I said, I met Omar Mukhtar and Latifah and Esperanza at Iman. Esperanza was a Latina multimedia artist and single mother in her early 30s who loves to teach but also talk to pay the bills. I had seen her, at different hip hop events before we met at Iman. And she told me that the reason why she's Latina, I think Dominican background, she's from Chicago, she grew up in the church, with house music and hip hop, and she becomes Muslim. And similar to Latifah, when she becomes Muslim, she enters into some communities, non-Black Muslim communities, where they're like, okay, all that stuff you got going on there, that's not Islam, you can't do that here. But when she comes to Iman, she's like, wait a minute, all that stuff I got going on, they're doing that here, right? So she felt seen, right? She felt like she belonged. But Iman's events and Iman's space is not just a Black space, it's not just a Latina space, it is a mixed multicultural space. And so for that reason then, Iman as a Muslim space was affirming for Esperanza, but it was also a source of frustration. So she told me once, right? See, I have a camouflage scarf. I've only worn it once because this Pakistani girl walked up to me like, this is so cool. And I was like to myself, I can't even pretend that's okay with me. And it's a girl that I love. Now, I want to back this up by saying, I've been wearing camouflage my whole life. I'm the camouflage queen. I wear it a lot because I like it, but also I feel like I can. It's appropriate for me to wear it because my brother was in war, people. Like on the jacket she's wearing, this surname, right, is my actual name on my jacket. Anyway, so the sister comes up just really sincerely. I really like your scarf. Where can I get it from? And I was kind of like, thank you. But I don't know really what else to say. It's a compliment, but in another way, it's really a thievery because we don't have much, right? Like, where does culture come from? It comes from people who don't have much. That's where hip hop comes from. That's where house music came from. That's where tying your hair up in a scarf or in fatigues, because you ain't got no other clothes, right? I mean, they, and here she's talking about sort of the non-Black Muslims, they going home to their mansions. How many mansions did I visit last week? They going home to silverware that's really silver. But you taking my scarf? Just let me have something. And I get it. You can't really tell people what they can put on their body. I get that. But there's a certain level you can at least give due to where it's done and at least try to do authentically yourself. You have to know your boundaries and give knowledge and respect. So Esperanza wore camouflage because she liked it, but also because racialized systemic inequality has shut her family out of economic opportunity, which shuttled her brother right into the service. In contrast, the Pakistani girl, in quotations in this story, who thought the camouflage was cool, had access to class-based and cultural privileges. She was educated, she was suburban, and as a South Asian in the US Muslim community, she had more cultural authenticity as a Muslim. Accordingly, the Pakistani girl's potential appropriation of camouflage was embedded in unequal power relations. Esperanza loved the girl loved her scarf. But as Esperanza put it, all that love was fraught, quote, no matter how much Islam we have in common, unquote. Yet the camouflage-loving Pakistani girl was not merely a cultural third wheel. She also was navigating her identity as a Muslim woman at the crossroads of hip-hop and Islam. The Pakistani girl that Esperanza was talking about reminded me of someone else that I actually spent time with, Rabia, who I could imagine also being excited about a scarf like that. But unlike the Pakistani girl in Esperanza's story, Rabia was working in Inglewood, which is a predominantly black community in Chicago. So the struggle was not just a fashion accessory for her. Yet and still, Esperanza noted insightfully that this does not mean that Rabia, she or any of us, can escape the complex realities of race, identity, and power in the fight to overcome inequality. And this insight, I feel like, is pretty critical to understanding Muslim cool, because at this meeting of Islam and hip hop, intersecting ideas of what it means to be Muslim and what it means to be black challenge and reproduce the meanings of race in the United States. So I have technically 4 minutes, and need a little more time, but we're gonna figure it out. I'm gonna get it together. I wanna say 2 things to end. So I started out by saying Muslim cool, right, is a way of being Muslim that tells a really important story about race, religion, and power in the United States. And so there are 3 things I want you to take away from that, based on all that you've kind of listened to me tonight. 1, the first is that when we think about Islam in the United States, we have to think about blackness because it's central, right? In the same way that black Islam had this significant impact on hip hop, right? Black people, black Muslims are central to what it means to be Muslim in this country. In the same way that black people in general are central to what it means to live in this country, right? So whether or not that person is blackness, right, is central to how they understand themselves as Muslims. We see that in the stories of people like Esperanza and Omar Mukhtar, who themselves are not black. The second thing that I want to say is, race and blackness then, of course, still matter. They're still really important categories of experience, categories of identity, and categories of oppression, right? And part of what Muslim cool is about is understanding all those different sort of valences, right? Identity, expression, oppression, right? And challenging the oppression. But third, right, is that in our context, right, blackness is something that can be used to fight against white supremacy, but also can be complicit in it, right? So the ways in which, right, black people, black ideas, black symbols can be marshaled, right, for the purposes that don't serve black people are also true. So the images you see up here, which are not well done, sorry, on the slide, are 2 things I wanted to end with. So thinking about the challenge, right, and this challenge to white supremacy. So we have the Grammys in 2017, and there was this performance by legendary hip-hop artists, A Tribe Called Quest, who were joined by Busta Rhymes and Consequence. And I started doing this thing on Twitter like every year, although I skipped last year, where I do a top 10 Islam and hip-hop things that happened in the year. So this is one of those things in 2017. What is significant here is that Q-Tip is Muslim, Ali Shaheed Muhammad is Muslim from Tribe Called Quest, Busta Rhymes is Muslim, Consequence is Muslim. And they were making this was a very charged political moment, right? I think Trump had just won or something like that, right? So they're making this significant, on like this huge, the Grammy is a global stage, right? And they're making this really significant political statement, and they're raising the Black Power fist. They're not just saying that, so this is kind of this iconic moment that's coming out of here, right? And this is the ways in which Muslim Cool, right, directly challenges, right, white supremacy in many different forms. And they're using this platform of the Grammys where they, it's kind of their space as artists. On the other side are some images from a recent piece in Vogue Arabia about Black Muslim women in hip hop. And I wanted to include this because although it is not a political challenge in the same way that this is, it is challenging, right? Ideas about who are Muslims, who matters, whose stories are important, right? And I think that essence of challenge and that essence of resistance is really also maybe the fourth takeaway from what it means, what happens when Blackness and Muslimness come together? What happens when Islam and hip hop comes together, right? What happens is we get this moment in which we challenge, right, systems of oppression and power. But that challenge, and I'll end with this, that challenge comes with risk. If we look at the intensity, right, and the risk really of state violence, if we look at the intensity of the state's repressive violence directed at Black power activists, from the surveillance of COINTELPRO and its relationship to the assassination of Malcolm X, to the police murders of youth activists such as Fred Hampton and groups such as MOVE, to the ascendance of Assata Shakur, to the FBI's most wanted list at the top of it, all this stands as a warning, right, that if you choose to challenge, if you choose to push a challenge, and particularly as people who carry identities that are already marginalized, right, as a Muslim, you're threatening. If you're an immigrant, you're threatening. If you're African descent, you're threatening. I mean, you already are a challenge. So then if you choose, right, to embrace that and to sort of work towards sort of further challenging systems of oppression and inequality, then the history tells you that there's a significant risk that you're taking when you do so, right? And I think when we think about that risk for Muslim Cool, right, or young Muslims, we're actually thinking about that risk for the American Muslim community, right? That will continue to have to consider, right, what are you willing to risk to belong versus what are you willing to risk to make the places where you live better and more just, right? And so I'm going to close with this. I kept saying I'm going to close, but I'm really closing now. At the Black Lives Matter protest I attended while preparing my book, it was common for organizers to lead demonstrators in chanting a mantra composed by Assata Shakur. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. It was reported on social media that in a confrontation with the police at the conclusion of a movement for Black Lives convening, demonstrators also chanted, "We gonna be all right," which is the chorus of a song by the same name by the hip hop artist Kendrick Lamar. I think these verses, Shakur's and Lamar's, point to what the future holds or can hold for Muslim Cool, for Muslims in the United States, and for the country as a whole. This future lies in an investment in alterity, the ability to imagine, articulate, and participate in alternate choices for resistance and political vision. This is a prospect that comes at high risk, but we have nothing to lose but our chains. We gonna be all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abdul Kabir, for that wonderful presentation. We would like to have a question and answer period now, and Amin is going to help me with cards. Is there anyone who would like a card and pen to write down something? Sorry, not seeing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. And while you get started on that, I'm going to ask a question.
Okay.
Because I have a microphone, so I can do whatever I want. My first question for you is, what is next for the research for Dr. Abdul Kabir? What do you think will be your next big project?
Oh, okay, sure. So I'm actually in the throes of my next big project. It's called Umi's Archive. What I'm doing is I'm working with my mother's personal and family archive, which starts kind of in the 1930s through 2018. It spans multiple continents, and I'm using it. My mother, my mother was born Audrey Weeks in Harlem, New York City in 1950, and she died Amina Matul Haq in Queens, New York in 2017. And she was an everyday person who lived a remarkable life. She integrated her junior high school in New York, not in the South, right? She was a student activist. She was a Black Panther Party member. She converted to Islam in the 70s and was really active in Muslim community work. She was a public school teacher, a single mom. And so she's really connected. Her story really connects to so many things that happened sort of in that important period, right? So the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s and beyond. And generally speaking, I feel like, that generation has a lot that we still don't know. A lot we can still learn from that generation. And the only way to do that is to begin to collect those stories and understand, interpret them, and share them. And so that's what I'm doing. Last year, I did a 6-part exhibition online from the archive, covering themes like Black Muslim womanhood, Black girlhood, the African diaspora, the legacy of Black power. There's a part of the collection, my grandfather, who I did not meet, served in World War II, and he served in what they call the forgotten theater of war. So he was in Iran and in India and Pakistan when he was in the service. And Black men didn't see combat, but they were sort of building roads and things like that. So there was a corridor they called the Persian corridor that he worked on. So a range of different things. So that's what I'm working on now. I'm working on really just being in this archive, pulling out its stories, because I really feel like, and particularly thinking about everyday people, everyday Black women, are really sources of knowledge. They know a lot of stuff, and nobody's listening, and we need to. So that's what I'm doing.
Thank you. Getting some good questions here. How has Muslim Cool interacted with Christian-based or non-religious Black artistry?
Great. So because Muslim Cool is founded or grounded in hip hop, of course, people are always interacting with people who are not Muslim, right? Because part of the argument about Muslim Cool and the impact of Black Islam on hip hop is not that you have to be Muslim for that to have had an impact on you, right? On the music and culture. When we talk about Black Islam sort of creating or inspiring, right, the element of knowledge of self. Knowledge of self is something that everybody in hip hop will espouse as something they're committed to, right? And to be honest, I also think, hip hop as a musical culture is always talking about existential questions, which is something that is a very religious thing to do, whether you're Muslim or Christian or Hindu or Buddhist or whatever, right? And I think even in the most kind of, to use a Christian terminology, in the most kind of profane hip hop music, you'll find some of these sort of existential questions, these questions of why am I here, what's going on, what's my relationship to these things. So by the nature of being in hip hop, there's always an interaction and a connection to, right, a non-Muslim artist or Christian-based hip hop artist. In the specific, I think it's interesting. I think I'll give this example from music itself in terms of a specific Christian-Muslim relationship. So people here are familiar with Kanye West. I made jokes about Kanye earlier, but we know who he is, right? Okay. And are you familiar with his song, Jesus Walks? Yes, you've heard it, right? So it's a great song. If you haven't listened to it, Jesus Walks is a great song. Jesus Walks was written, or I think it was all written, but it might have just been co-written. But I think it was all written by one of Kanye's friends, Rhymefest, who was a Muslim. Right? So, and this happens all the time, right? So in terms of this kind of, and so even though Kanye is talking about Jesus and Rhymefest, loves Jesus because Muslims love Jesus, but just not as the Son of God, right? But what they're sharing, or the ability to do that, is not, I think a lot of times religion and hip hop music can be kind of promiscuous, right? So it's not about the specificities per se of the doctrine, but it's about what links these things together, right? Sort of trying to live a righteous life, right? Trying to walk in Jesus' footsteps or Muhammad's footsteps. Like, whoever you call the person, or Buddha's footsteps, whatever you call that person, this is a common theme. And so this runs throughout music. So I also give that as an example of what it looks like, how Muslim Cool relates to. And then to add on to that, and then Lupe Fiasco, who is another Muslim artist, also from Chicago, Kai from Chicago, Rhyme Fest from Chicago, Lupe's from Chicago. He did a remix of Jesus Walks called Muhammad Walks, right? And so it kind of keeps going.
Okay, I have a couple questions that have come in about Sufism. So
Okay.
would you like to...
We'll see.
That's good for me. But would you like to say some things about Sufism and how there may be some parallels with what's going on in the hip-hop movement in the United States? Do you see parallels there?
So I always find, do I see parallels? I mean, Sufism is a part of Islam, so that parallel wouldn't be the exact, term I would use. Sufism isn't outside Islam, right? It's Islam, right? So, but maybe what I might say is, what parts of maybe Sufi practice do we find in this expression, right, of Muslim Cool? I'll rephrase it that way, right? And so I think, the first thing, tasawwuf, which is the Arabic term for Sufism, is a lot of things, and so this is hard to answer because it's a whole lot of things. But one thing I'll focus on, right, is there's a practice called the wird. No. Is that what I want to talk about? What do I want to focus on? But is that what I wanted to say? That wasn't what I wanted to say, but let me come back to that. What I wanted to say was tell a joke. That's what I wanted. The first thing I wanted to tell a joke. So, I like to say about hip hop. So in Islamic tradition, you have to have a chain, a silsila, right? And this is also part of Sufism. That's where the Sufism comes in, right? So if you're doing something, you have to be like, I'm doing it because so-and-so did it, because so-and-so did it, because so-and-so did it, because so-and-so did it, because the prophet did it. If you don't got no chain, nobody want to hear nothing from you. And that's the same thing in hip hop, particularly in hip hop dance. Who taught you? Where'd you learn that from? Where does that come from? Who are your people? You have to have a chain. If you don't have a silsila, don't nobody want to hear from you. It's not legit, right? So that's how that's one way that I sort of connect that. I think that's one connection. In terms of dhikr and wird and this kind of thing, I mean, I think that, one artist that I think really maybe exemplifies this the most powerfully for me is an artist named Amir Suleiman. So he is a Black US American Muslim artist. He's from Rochester but lives in Atlanta. And he has a song called, from an album some years ago, it's called Hallelujah. The song is called Hallelujah, right? And for those who don't know, the term hallelujah and the Arabic term alhamdulillah are etymologically related, because of the Muslims in Spain and a bunch of history that I won't talk about, you can Google it. But the terms are related. So he has this song where both his lyrics, because he's a spoken word artist, he's also an MC. So both his lyrics speak to sort of deeply spiritual, esoteric, metaphysical, all these other realms, right? They speak to that. But the actual chorus of the song too is basically him chanting over and over again, Alhamdulillah, Hallelujah, over and over again, which is a practice, right? When we think of Sufism as a practice, we see that, right? This idea of remembering God, and so you repeat God's name, you repeat God's quality, you repeat this kind of thing over and over again to reach a spiritual status. And so I would say that probably also was something I would connect, because I think Amir is Sufi, he's Tijani, he's a part of the Tijani Sufi order, but also there is a kind of, when you're in the Sufi, one of the terms used as a hal, you want to get into a state, a particular kind of state that brings you to awareness. And I feel like with Amir's music, that is the kind of thing that happens when you're listening to his music.
Thank you. Another question we have is, you mentioned that you didn't like the word hijab.
Right. Hate it.
Can you please elaborate on that? Also, great presentation.
Oh, thank you. I know because people weren't really responding. I wasn't sure how this was going, but thank you for that. So why do I hate hijab? Okay, so I grew up in Brooklyn, New York City, where they paint murals of Biggie. And I grew up calling my headscarf either a headscarf or a khimar. Khimar. Khimar is the word that's in the Quran that actually, in the verse in the Quran that people refer to say that Muslim women need to dress a particular kind of way, the term that is used in the Quran is khimar. It is not hijab. Hijab just means a veil, literally like a curtain. In the Quran, where other parts of the Quran where the hijab shows up, it's a curtain. It's a different kind of story. It's different. Okay. Hijab for me as a term is a form of cultural hegemony coming from two angles. On one hand, I have found that hijab as a term is popular in Arab, US American, and South Asian now, right, US American communities, right, to refer to a head covering. It's common not just to refer to a head covering, but a particular kind of head covering. And I didn't really get into this as much as I should have in the talk, but one of the problems challenges we have with anti-Blackness in Muslim communities, right, is that culturally informed, like Latifah's friends telling her she gonna go to hell, she wear her scarf like that, culturally informed understandings of what Muslims should do, whatever it is, right, can become hegemonic, right? And it can make other people who do other things feel like what I'm doing is not real, it's not authentic, I can't do it, they feel bad, this kind of thing. So hijab for me, on an internal Muslim kind of tip, represents that. Secondly, the broader non-Muslim mainstream, whether it's government officials, NPR journalists, university professors, right, pick up the term hijab and all of the exclusionary cultural meanings with it and then apply it. So you go to Target and they're like, oh, there's a Muslim woman on an ad now. She don't look like me. Her scarf don't like me. Her skin, I don't care. That doesn't to me, right? So for me, it's like hijab then just reinforces a kind of erasure and an exclusion and anti-Blackness. So I don't use it. I hate it. I don't use it. I know people use it. I know it don't mean all that to everybody, but I'm a scholar. That's what I do. I think a lot, right? I go deep into it, right? But that's why I don't mess with hijab. So I don't use it. Actually, I've been playing around one day. You know that is you might not know. Anyway, this is this LL Cool J song from way back in the day. Mama said knock you out, and it starts don't call it a comeback. So I have this dream one day of redoing that, don't call it a hijab, and keep going with that, because that's how I feel about it. Mama said knock you out is one of these songs where you're ready to that's how I feel about the hijab. But really it's not really about the word itself. Really it's about the way the word circulates. It's like a cultural object. And the kinds of Muslims and the kinds of Muslim stories and the kinds of Muslim practices that get lost, that get erased, that get obliterated, right, because of how that circulates.
About one more question, okay? How can non-Black Muslims who are maybe no good at hip hop and don't know, non-Black Muslims who are no good at hip hop. They're just trying, but they're not understanding it. They want to appreciate it. Maybe it doesn't resonate with them. Mm-hmm. How can they still find ways to be more supportive about this movement?
Okay, so one, I'm having a hard time understanding anyone could not love hip hop. I'm the synapses in my brain are just not even connecting right now. I'm how does that work? I don't even understand that. So let me kind of try to process that first. So you said something, Dr. Nichols, earlier at the dinner, right, about how we do research and how you can start from the general to the specific or the specific to the general, right? And when I opened up, I said Muslim cool is a way of being Muslim, right? And it has its intricacies. But it also is a way of being Muslim that's telling a story, right? Telling a story for us to understand how race and religion and power operate in the United States, right? So if you're a non-black Muslim, if you're a non-Muslim, right, or whatever, right, and for some ungodly reason you can't get into hip hop, you don't need to get into hip hop, right, to sort of understand and to learn from the story of Muslim Cool, right, and then take that learning and apply it to what you do in the world, right? So you don't have to sort of get into the music and the culture like that to sort of pay attention to what the story is telling you. The story is telling you, right, that blackness matters, that black people matter, right? The story is telling you that race and racism are still a problem that we're dealing with, right? The story is telling you that we each can be a part of the problem and the solution, right? You can sort of recognize your own positionality, how you fit, where you are, what you're doing, what power you have, what you don't, and how you do that, or you can act like you don't have none, right? And then perpetuate something, right? So you don't have to be sort of like an MC, right, to sort of get it, but you have to learn. Like, like one of the things, right, that Esperanza says, like, I get it, you can't tell people what to put in their bodies, right? But you have a responsibility to learn where something comes from and why you're doing it, and then demonstrate some respect. And that's something that is true whether you're into hip hop or not.
With that, I want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abdul Kabir. We hope that you'll join us for some refreshments outside, and also if you'd like to purchase a copy of her book and have her sign it for you, we'd love that as well. I do ask that you be mindful when you're in line for the signing that there is a line probably behind you, and so you might need to move through that fairly quickly and then try to talk to her some more afterwards. I'm sure she'll be amenable to that. So thank you, everyone, and have a splendid evening.